back to another Serger tip clip. I did a previous tip clip on how to get beautiful results on a rolled hem, and I got some questions afterwards, specifically asking about when a rolled hem falls off of sheer fabric, and a couple of other questions as well, and some came in via email. And Catherine and Alice had some good questions, and I want to address those today. And this is on sheer fabric. This is just a chiffon, and it's not an expensive one, but this can happen very easily when you're working on a sheer fabric, or even a fabric that isn't so sheer. You're going along great guns and having a wonderful time, and your rolled hem looks beautiful, and then suddenly, it is fallen off the edge of the fabric, and it's very annoying, and there is no good way to go back and actually fix that one area. You really have to start all over again with the rolled hem, because you just won't get a good look on that at all. So there are a few things to consider with a rolled hem, and how to get them to stay put and stay on the edge of your fabric. So I hope I answer those today. And again, if people have more questions, I'm very happy to answer those as well, and even maybe do another tip clip on a question that you have. And thanks for subscribing. Again, that helps all YouTubers keep putting out good content on YouTube, and I appreciate it when you do subscribe, so thanks very much. So one of the first things that I like to talk about in workshops when it comes to rolled hems, or actually any serger or sewing project that you're doing, it doesn't necessarily have to be on a serger, but operator technique really makes a difference in the finished product. Even if your fabric is the perfect one for your project and you've got all of your settings correct on your machine, sometimes you might not get a perfect result. And believe it or not, it can be from mishandling the fabric inadvertently. So I always say light fingers and hands when you're working on your serger. And particularly on a rolled hem, if you think about how close the needle is to the edge, the raw edge of the fabric that you're stitching, it's very close. It's only in a few threads from the edge of the fabric. So it's kind of a fragile stitch, but it's a great stitch as well. So you have to be careful to make sure that when you're stitching, you have your fabric going directly back, straight back when you're stitching along, and really avoid the tendency to hold on to it with your left hand in back of the presser foot and kind of pulling off to the left, because again, if you think about where the stitch is forming, the needle is stitching on the right edge of the fabric. If you have your left hand pulling off to the left, chances are you're going to pull that stitch right off the edge of the fabric. So that's one of my top tips for keeping that stitch right on your fabric and not having little intervals that fall off. But let's go to the machine and take a look at a couple of the other little things that I think help keep the stitch where you want it to be. Let's take a quick look at the settings for the rolled hem. Nothing in the left needle. There's no left needle in this. My right needle and upper loopers are set on the normal or default tension settings of 4, and I raised the tension on the lower looper to 7. The default setting on this machine is lower than that, but I prefer the look of it being a little bit tighter, and it pulls the thread over to the upper looper thread to the underside very effectively and creates a beautiful rolled hem on that 7 setting. This is my stitch length. It's 1.2. It's a short stitch, but I'm working on a sheer fabric, and I'll tell you about the thread in my upper looper in just a second. I've lowered the differential feed below 1 or N to 0.8 because I don't want the fabric to pucker. Because it's a sheer fabric, they do have a tendency to pucker a little bit if you have, in a single layer, if you have your differential feed on 1 or N. So that 0.8 will hold the fabric flat and keep it nice and smooth and no puckers as I go through. Now, going back to the stitch length, I have woolly polyester. in my upper looper. I'm using Wonderfill Soft Lock, which is really nice. It fills the edge beautifully, and because it's a woolly polyester, not nylon, it doesn't have a tendency to melt the way woolly nylon has at a lower temperature on your iron. So that for me is a big plus, because sometimes I'm in a hurry and I forget to check my iron temperature, which is also very annoying when you don't do that. So I'm going to go and do a close-up on the stitching, and I'm going to mention a couple of other things. We're all set up, and now I'm going to show you the first one of my favorite little tricks, and this solves a couple of different problems. Using water-soluble stabilizer. And this is just a regular weight. It's not heavy. I want something that's going to dissolve easily. And you need something that you can see through as well. And you can see there's a little bit of a grid or a texture to the underside of it. And they say that if you put that textured side against your fabric, it will grip it a little bit better. So that's what I like to do. But if I try to start this right in front of the foot, the way I would be doing probably with the fabric, sometimes the pressure of the toe of the foot pushes it back and it doesn't let it slide under and let the feed dogs grab it effectively. So I like to bring it up. I always cut it longer than my edge that I'm going to be using, and I like to anchor it by putting the needle right down in it. And then I'm going to take my fabric. This is that same fabric that you saw. It's a sheer chiffon, and it's always going to be stitched right side up when you do a rolled hem on any kind of a project. But I am going to put that in under, and my cutting width on this one is designated at 5.5, and that should work fine on this fabric. But if you have a situation where your fabric, if the stitch still falls off the fabric, you can always change that stitch width. So what I want you to do is watch the knife and watch the distance between the edge of the presser foot. If you move that knife out to the right a little bit more, it will cut off just a smidge less of the fabric edge and allow the needle to bite into a little bit more of the fabric. So I'm going to change my stitch width right now to from 5.5 and just show you how, as I notch it out, and that's only 2 ticks. And now if I bring it out to 6, that makes a considerable difference. But this is something that you have to do and test on your scrap fabric, because you don't want to cut your fabric so little that you've got some of the raw edge peeking out on the wrong side of your hem, because that doesn't look nice. But on this, I think it should be fine back to 5.5, so I'm going to move that back, and I can take a still shot of how I do that adjusting. But every machine is a little bit different. So let's give this a go and see how this looks. My water-soluble stabilizer is on top of the right side of the fabric. I'm going to just trim off an arbitrary amount. And as I said, I'm just trimming an arbitrary amount. And I think it was Catherine who asked about sheer fabric on the bias. So this is on the bias grain line. But you can see how that woolly polyester is really filling out the edge of my fabric nicely and hanging onto it. And I'm feeding my fabric straight back, very light fingers and hands on it. Just guiding it along, not stretching or pulling. Chain off. And let me just show you, this is fun. I'm glad this actually happened. When I chained off and I was pulling my fabric off to the left, see what it did? Even with the stabilizer on it, that stitch fell off the edge. Now, look how beautiful that woolly polyester fills out the edge of that. And what's the other thing that you don't see here? no serge or stubble, or those little pokey threads from the edge of the fabric, even on the bias grain line. How am I going to remove this stabilizer from the fabric? Well, it is a water-soluble one, and so that should give you a clue. I don't want to just arbitrarily pull this off, because chances are I could very easily pull the stitch off with it and then again have to start all over. So what I'm going to do is just dab the edge, or you could even spritz it. It depends on if you've washed your fabric or not. You can just dab it or spritz it with a little bit of water. Give that water a few seconds or a minute to work, and then just gently pull the stabilizer off toward the body of the fabric, not away from it. You don't want to pull it like this, because if you happen to miss one of the spots with that water and it wasn't dissolved, again, you take the risk of pulling the stitch off with it. So the stabilizer does a couple of wonderful things. It keeps that stitch on the fabric. It gives you a gorgeous stitch. Look at that. It is so beautiful. And also no serge or stubble. It's great. And this, I put a darker color thread in the lower looper and the needle. And you can see again how that woolly polyester is the one that really shows up. And if I had matching light pink thread in the needle and lower looper, you wouldn't even see those threads. But let's take a pink at the back side. There's that lower looper thread pulling the woolly polyester to the back. So I hope that helps you. And Catherine and Alice, if you still have some questions or you want me to go over anything else, or any of my other viewers do, send them along. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining me today. I hope that helps you with some of the rolled hem questions you might have had. And if you think of more, please send them along and I'll be happy to do another tip clip for you. So thanks for joining me today. Happy sewing and serging.